Well met, everyone. I am Rich the Lich, and today I am talking about the Circle of Wildfire Druid. This is a druid subclass that you can find in Unearthed Arcana. This is something that I like to consider kind of like official, unofficial stuff, right? And what I mean by that is it's unofficial because it's not an fully printed official WotC product, so it's not something that unequivocally, across the board, all players and DMs can say, hey, we can bring this to our table because we know it's been run through the ringer and it's been play tested thoroughly, so on and so forth. But I also say that there's the official aspect to it because this is stuff that's being talked about by WotC designers and whatnot. So regardless, this is a video that's going to be just like my Onomancy video where I'm just going to kind of talk through it a little bit. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to put up a video just like I did with the Onomancy video. And this video is going to be the folks over at D&D Beyond, so Todd and Jeremy Crawford, just talking through and talking over the Circle of Wildfire Druid, answering a few questions on it, and kind of just talking about the catalyst and the inspiration for where this came from. Now, I'm going to put in the description a sort of timestamp if you want to skip ahead, if you've either seen that video already, or you just want to get into my thoughts, where I'm going to kind of run it through via the D&D Beyond interface, and I'll just talk about my thoughts on it, what I think about it from perhaps a player's perspective, although I'm not a player as much as many of you are. I will oftentimes, I have played in 5th edition D&D, and I do enjoy the role of a player, although I've definitely gone kind of down that road from the side of the DM screen as a dungeon master. What inevitably happens a lot of times in my campaigns as well is my son and my wife play. And they're not veteran role players. To a certain extent, yes, they enjoy the game, but I think they play because they know it's important to me. And oftentimes, whenever we start any new campaign, my wife always comes to me and says, hey, can you make my character for me? Can you help me make my character? Whatever it may be. So I need to kind of have my finger on the pulse of what's going on from the player side of things. One of my long-standing players, I consider him like a brother. He's one of my closest friends. He's been doing geek stuff with me for 25-ish years, Andy. After I created the Onomancy video, when he came to the table during my last previous session, he said, hey, dude, have you taken a look at the Circle of Wildfire Druid? It's in the same sort of PDF template where Onomancy was talked about. So I thought, hey, I'm going to take a look at it. He was also asking me in a future campaign if he was allowed to play this, through my house rules and what's allowed, what's not allowed. And looking through it so far, Andy, my answer would be yes, you can play it. I know it's not put into official content, but every DM, of course, has the right to take anything that's out there, whether it's custom-made stuff, player-made things, Unearthed Arcana, whatever. So I really like it. So let's kind of jump into this thing a little bit and let's see what's what.
One of the other new subclasses in UA is also not a departure for druids, but it's very fascinating. You've turned a wildfire into a function of being a druid, which it very much is part of nature in that cycle. So tell me about this subclass and the story that this tells.
The druid's magic is about every aspect of nature. This includes the obvious stuff, plants and animals, weather. In Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, we explored sort of the natural forces of death and fungus in the form of the Circle of Spores. Here we wanted to explore this natural phenomenon of fire and destruction actually being an important part of the cycle of life. Fire has always been associated with the druid, actually. The druid is the class that has, the produce flame spell.
Right.
The druid has been able to wield a fiery scimitar. So going all the way back to 1st edition, there have been fire spells in the druid. Now I think part of this, and this is speculation on my part of it is I think because in Irish mythology and other Celtic myth, druids are depicted sometimes as wielding fire. In fact, in a massive battle that they're involved in, they're even described as calling down a rain of fire on the Fomorians that they are going up against.
Oh, yes.
So fire being associated with the druid is very traditional in a way, but this presentation is not traditional, where you have this druid who has connected themselves in a deep mystical way with this nature spirit that is a force of destruction and of life. And because of that connection, the druid is able to marshal the same destructive and also nurturing powers that spirit has. And so it's a fun take, I think, for the druid, because not only because of the themes that it delves into, but then also in terms of the play experience, the druid is able to have this fiery spirit present. And it also is doing something that we experimented with in the Circle of Spores, and that is giving the druid something else to do with their wild shape other than turn into a beast. Granted, the Circle of the Moon also does this by, at high enough level, you have the ability to turn into an elemental. And so we like using sometimes wild shape as a currency. And so in this case, if the druid wants to, instead of turning into a beast, they can manifest this wildfire spirit, which can launch fire, as you would expect. It would be a miss on our part if we say, here's a fire spirit that can't shoot fire.
Yeah.
So yes, it shows up and can shoot fire, but you can also use it to explosively teleport, because one of the abilities of this spirit is a fiery teleportation that can move your whole group from one place to another, or whatever the creatures you decide to move. This spirit also gives you the ability to do things actually with bodies on the battlefield. That's something we're exploring because, again, we wanted to show how destruction or death can give rise to a new phase of life. So again, there are these themes throughout the subclass, and I think people are going to have fun playing with it. Another subclass actually that influenced some of our work on this, and I think some fans have noticed it, is how we designed the Wildfire Spirit is influenced by what we did with the pet in the Battlesmith in the Artificer,
yes.
Where we built this pet with its stat block right into the subclass, really with the goal on our part of making it easy to use this companion. Rather than having you go look in the monster manual or another text for the stats, it's right there. Doing that also allows us to give you a lot of control, because we know exactly what that companion is capable of doing. This is in contrast to regular wild shape and also how the Beastmaster Ranger works, where those abilities give you the liberty of essentially looting the monster manual and other books for any beast that we publish that is of an eligible challenge rating. Because we give you that liberty comes with a lot of limitations. Because in a way, we needed to build safeguards in, because there are so many different variations with so many different abilities, and we could not predict, 5, 6 years ago when we were writing the core books, what we might be designing today, 5 years later. But if we design the stat block in the subclass, because we have total certainty about what that thing can do, it means we can actually be a bit more generous in how you control that pet, what it's capable of doing. So I'm very interested to see what people think. Overall, in the Battlesmith, people loved it. And we'll see if people enjoy this very different kind of companion, because the Wildfire Spirit is not at all like the Iron Defender that was in the Battlesmith, though Iron Defender now called the Steel Defender in Eberron Rising from the Last War.
Why the name change?
The name changed because in the Bestiary section there was also an Iron Defender, and we actually needed to distinguish. We needed to distinguish between the two different creatures.
Am I allowed to ask, is its form always going to be a hound?
So the Battlesmith is able to determine what the Steel Defender looks like.
Okay, just curious. What I very much love,
just as the Circle of Wildfire Druid is able to determine what that spirit looks like. We give some suggestions.
like a phoenix.
You could make it look like a phoenix. We say it could really look like any animal wreathed in fire. It might also look like a vague humanoid form with flames on it. Really, it's up to you. We always love it when we can give players the ability to customize the appearance of something like this, especially when it's not crucial to the game that it look a particular way.
Right.
And we know that people love deciding how something sounds and looks and et cetera when it's a part of their character.
Yeah, it's a very easy thing, and I certainly get caught up in it myself with the form that is suggested. And sometimes you'll forget D&D is yours. You can reflavor things any way you want.
Right.
It certainly helps when the creators tell you so.
Yes. Yeah, and we in more recent books we've done that more and more because with the core books, partly we've focused on the core D&D aesthetic, and so we don't spend as much time in those books telling you, you can actually make this stuff look however you want. But one of the things actually we've learned over the last 5 years looking at playtest feedback is beginning players in particular often look to us to give them permission to customize things. So in newer material, that's why we do more often say things like, you get to decide what this looks like.
Right.
If I were to go back in time and put some extra text about spellcasting in the player's handbook, for instance, I would put a note in there for all the brand new players, like if you're casting Magic Missile, you get to decide what it looks like. You're not bound by the little bit of flavor text that's in the spell, because if you decide your Magic Missiles look like a bunch of flying pumpkins and someone else decides they're shooting butterflies, that's great. It has no effect on what the spell does, and it's a way for you to express the personality and history of your character.
I adore that. I would always throw up a jack-o'-lantern and have it explode. Legend of Sleepy Hollow style.
Yeah.
This is also very restoration, very healing.
Yes.
So this is both sides of the spectrum. This is doing some fire damage, but also healing your party at the same time.
And that dichotomy of destruction and restoration is not only a big part of the Circle of Wildfire, it's actually a core theme of the Druid itself.
Right.
The Druid has many of the healing spells of the Cleric. There's some that the Cleric has that the Druid lacks. But the druid also has a larger kit of destructive magic than the cleric does, and that is also intentional. The druid has always occupied a space that we imagine as being somewhere in between the cleric and the wizard. That if you want to play a character who is a mix of the two, and you don't want to multi-class, and you also enjoy the sort of ancient primal feel, the druid is the way to go. I bring this up because often people, rightly, will be so excited by wild shape, the ability to turn into an animal, that it can be easy to forget the amazing other abilities that the druid has, and that the druid is this full-fledged spellcaster,
Absolutely.
with able to hold their own next to a cleric and a wizard, and also able to actually fill roles similar to what the wizard fills and that the cleric fills. So often, if a group
Even fill the role of a fighter,
yes,
as a tank.
yes.
Like,
In fact, we recently here at work had a game day. It's been a while since we just sat down and all played D&D together. And on that game day, I played a druid, and we were all playing first level characters, and my first level druid was essentially the frontline warrior without wild shape. It was just simply because of my ability to heal myself and have some armor on and wield the scimitar. I was up there battling it away while many of the other characters were in the back. And so the druid has amazing versatility, not just with magic, but even with some of their weapon and armor choices.
Since the beginning, I was always so fascinated by druids. I thought they're the coolest thing in D&D. And I wish they had more love out there. I wish more people would try to play druids because they are so cool. And again, primordial. And there's just something about them kind of witchy, and obviously very druidic, because they're druids. But it's that sense of like there's something older than time, and that's where your magic comes from. That's both scary, or it can be very inviting at the same time. It's a totally different flavor from being a wizard or a cleric.
Yeah, and we're really trying to show with subclasses like Circle of Wildfire just how interesting the druid story space is, and that you can dive into that space even if you have no interest in spending session after session as a bear or a panther or whatever your favorite animal is to turn into. I mean, the druid is also fantastic for the person who wants to play an animal, but again, there's so much more.
Wild shape is so evocative. It does kind of override your brain when you think of it.
Although again, what's funny is historically, wild shape was not the signature feature of the druid back in first edition.
No.
Yes, the druid could transform, but that was just sort of one of several of its abilities, and its spellcasting was more formidable than its wild shape abilities. In real-world folklore, the druid's ability to transform was actually a kind of minor, almost like party trick, and was usually used for reconnaissance, like turn into a little, or travel, turn into a bird to cover a large distance. But when the druid really wanted to throw down, like again in Irish mythology, it was with like calling fire down from the heavens. And I might have mentioned this before in an interview. What's fascinating is when you look at old folklore and find out what was called the druid gift, it was not shape-changing, it was actually foresight. That you knew that one of the most distinguishing features of a druid was that their ability to see the future. Because the word druid, if you sort of disentangle it, it means wise.
Right.
They were the wise ones. They were in a way wizards. And that's kind of what they are. It's just you can almost imagine them as wizards of a tradition far older than
proto-wizards.
Than the form of academic wizardry that wizards practice. And also druids, in a way, their magic and their practice of it feels even more ancient than what clerics practice.
Yeah, I love it. I'm convinced everyone play druid now.
The Circle of Wildfire Druid. As I said, this is Unearthed Arcana, so this is playtest content, as it says here. Druids who are members of the Circle of Wildfire understand the necessity of destruction, such as how a forest fire promotes growth, so on and so forth. If you watched the video just a moment ago, or you've already previously seen it, then you know that I like the aspect of it where they're kind of drawing upon the sort of origins of the druid class, or the druid, I should say, not even as a class, way before even Tolkien and D&D became a thing. Here you're looking at mythology and tradition and, Celtic myth, so on, and as they said in the video, where the druid was sort of the wizard, of ancient time, so to speak, and whether they were using elements and natural forces and whatnot. So I like that they've drawn upon that. Now, for some actual features, I think one thing that immediately stands out when you're talking about druid and fire in the same sentence is the iconic fireball, right? And if you look at their new spell list that you get, the other cool thing with these things, with their circle spells, is you always have them prepared, and they don't count towards the number of spells that you can prepare each day. So you just get these things as you reach appropriate levels once you're within this circle. So giving you the Firebolt cantrip, giving you Fireball, giving you Scorching Ray, giving you Fire Shield, giving you Flame Strike, which was previously on the Cleric spell list, giving you all these fire things, it immediately screams to fire, fire, fire for druid, right? So it definitely captures that essence, that element of fire to it. But you also have things like Aura of Life, and you still have your typical druid spell list stuff, which does give you, as spoken about in the video, you still have those elements of being able to heal and being able to cast, or I should say, being able to restore players. So you've got kind of that dichotomy, as they said, right? And those two elements of destruction and restoration. Okay, so that's a really cool thing. Now, the main sort of selling point and the vibe of this circle of Wildfire Druid is going to be the wildfire that you summon. The really cool thing about this is where it says that you are free to kind of create this thing and manifest it in whatever flavor, you know, that you see fit. And what I like is it's not changing the mechanics of it, right? You're not saying that it has different stats than what's listed and it doesn't have different, you know, attributes and different actions, but I like that you can kind of create it as a phoenix. Do you want to have it as sort of a fey creature that's on fire? Do you want to have it as like a little mini magman guy? Whatever you want to create it as. So I like that freedom. That's something that draws in new players. It allows the creativity, you know, just like you would see with someone saying, hey, can my studded leather armor look like this and have this? And maybe they played something in a video game, you know, or maybe they've seen some character in a movie or they want it to look like some superhero costume. Don't take that away from the player, the freedom of that, or the freedom of how they create their fireball. Maybe their fireball is purple flame, whatever it may be, as long as you're not changing the mechanics of it. So I like that they sort of promote that, where you can create it as you want. Now, the very essence of this thing, the wildfire spirit that you summon, to me, it's another way of sort of creating the epitome of druid, which is utility, right? If we were to look at a druid from the perspective of something like a World of Warcraft, right? You go to a dungeon and your group says, hey, we need a tank. We need some thick, strong, heavy armored character to stand in front of the boss and let the boss beat on him while the damage people in the back do what they do. So the druid can say, well, that's fine. I'll go into bear form then. But then maybe later on in another dungeon, they say, hey, we need more damage here, right? So the druid can turn into cat form and do more roguish type of things, right? And deal more damage. Maybe the druid is playing as a restoration druid and he's a healer. Maybe the druid is a pure sort of spellcaster in balance form and using nature magic to deal damage. So you have just a variety of ways that you can play. And even as the solo player, from a druid's perspective, you might say, well, I've been cat form and bear form and I'm up close and I'm in melee, but you know what, my next couple of levels I want to kind of stand back a little bit and be a spellcaster. You have that variety. And I think another way to look at variety from the perspective of druid in 5th edition D&D and at the table, right, in combat on the battle mat, is variety is something that can also come about not just by the diversity in the things you can do, in the case of a druid being able to deal damage and also heal and so on and so forth. The wildfire spirit being able to be somewhere else on the mat different than where you are, right? And the fact that you can cast spells, you know, through some of these other features. I believe it's right here, Enhanced Bond. The bond with your wildfire spirit enhances your destructive and restorative spells. Whenever you cast a spell that deals fire damage or restores hit points while your spirit is summoned, roll a d8. Cool, great. But then also here, in addition, when you cast a spell with a range other than self, the spell can originate from you or your wildfire spirit. That is another thing that I think can be overlooked sometimes in bringing about the essence of utility and what the druid is about. Is not only do you have the diversity within your toolkit, so to speak, within your spells, right? Like I said, you've got destructive magic, you have restorative magic. Options are what bring about utility. That's what allows the druid to sort of stand out and have its own sort of unique little niche than just a pure wizard or something like this, or even a fighter, right? Is you have options. And when you have a wildfire spirit and something else that's you can sort of manifest and translate your magic through, that gives you more options, because no longer do I need to just worry about I can only heal those that are near me. I can heal based off of where I'm at on the mat, but I can also heal based off of where my wildfire spirit is. So having another sort of summon creature, if you will, another entity through which you can manifest your magic and your influence just creates more options, because now you just have more variability and more efficiency on the table space, because you're kind of in multiple places at one time. And then to kind of piggyback off of that is you have this really cool thing where through the Wildfire Spirit, you have this fiery teleportation action, which requires your bonus action, but the spirit and each willing creature of your choice within 5 feet of it can teleport up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space. And those that you sort of leave behind take damage, right? So again, you have this interaction between you and your spirit, which is, again, just sort of bringing more utility, more variability in what you can do. They're giving you more options because, as I said, you already have a toolkit with the druid in that I want to maybe deal destructive magic. I want to maybe heal. But now that you have that option of saying, well, I wasn't able to heal because I'm not close enough to the guy that needs healing, but my Wildfire Spirit is. Or maybe my Wildfire Spirit might move over to here and fly with the 30 feet and hover over there. And that now gives me so many options on my turn. And then with the teleportation aspect is you just have this constant interaction between sort of a druid and like another mini druid in your spirit. So it just is a really cool sort of vibe and feel, and that flow of not only creating the essence of fire and the essence of flame and having that destructive element through fireball, through firebolt, right, through fire shield and all these other things, but the interaction with your Wildfire Spirit, I think, really does just enhance the essence of what a druid is about, which is variability, or which is variety, right? Which is utility and just more and more options in how you want to handle any given situation. The skills in and of themselves, you know, the things that you get, I like that you have that, as I said, sort of you get to roll that D8 and you get to add that to either some healing or some damage. You've got the Flames of Vitality thing where when something dies, you can use that thing that's dead as a sort of a fount in which you can either pull healing magic from that by, you know, friendlies that touch it, or you can sort of corpse explode, if you will, and create fire that comes off of that. So that's really cool. And then you have your sort of big one, which is Blazing Endurance. Instead of dying, you drop to 1 hit point instead, as it says, and you gain a bunch of temporary hit points. Okay, and then you also deal fire damage to things around you and whatnot. So I like that you have just this sort of playing off of the Wildfire Spirit, which is giving you more options and more variance in how you want to use your spells and your magic. But then, because of these spells that are very fire-based, and Fireball, right, the iconic, and Flame Strike, the iconic, and even Raise Dead, which is something that previously was not on the Druid spell list, I don't think. You now have the essence of utility as well, because you can utilize, obviously, these different aspects of destruction and restorative magic. So I think they've just captured the essence and the spirit of the Wildfire Druid quite well in this. So this is something that, yes, Andy, to answer your question, in the next campaign, you are free to use this class, just as they are doing with the Artificer. And Unearthed Arcana has kind of, you know, what they do is sort of the official guys create some content that's out there, and through feedback from the community and fans, we often sort of wait to see if something like this might be put into official content. That way, just other players and DMs have the confidence of saying, hey, this was run through the ringer. We're quite confident that this thing has been play tested. It's now official. We can all use it and it's available. And I would not doubt, just like the Artificer is probably going to see some actual official play within the new Eberron stuff that's coming out, I would not doubt if the Wildfire Druid does not also see play officially, you know, and is not put into some book, some content somewhere, because I think it captures the essence of the Druid, as I said, with that variability and the utility and just the different options. And now you're not just playing off of where the Druid is, but you also have options based on where the Wildfire Spirit is as well. But then you're also creating more variety in that kind of dichotomy between the destructive fire, burn everything element, but also still having the Druid spell list of restorative magic and so on. So it's just a really cool subclass. This is the Circle of Wildfire Druid. That's all I have for you folks. Thanks everyone for watching, and take care.